You're listening to Cinema Red Pill. I'm Sharon.
And I'm Timothy.
And we have a guest today called Wilfred Okichie. I hope I've said that right. But Wilfred is a film critic and a film curator, certified on Rotten Tomatoes. Has written for several publications like The Continent, IndieWire, Variety, The Verge, OK Africa. The list is really long. But Wilfred, please take a moment to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Wilfred Okichie. You already did the introduction. I'm a film film critic slash programmer slash writer. Yeah, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Wilfred. Really happy to have you on the podcast. And on this episode, we will be talking about Elesin Oba, the King's Horseman. It is currently on Netflix, so really, really accessible for everyone who has that. Picking this film, though, was a bit of a process. I don't know. It was a process because I think the other option we had was a Nicolapo, but I found this film to be a lot easier to watch. So Elesin Oba is a film based on a true story set in the 1940s during World War II in Oyo town in Nigeria, where a king has just died, and as the tradition demands, Elesin Oba, the king's horseman, must perform a ritual suicide in order to join his dead king in the afterlife. There's a British officer who's in charge of the town and doesn't approve of the ritual, so he confronts the people and tries to stop it, which leads to tragic events. It's an adaptation of the Death and the King's Horseman, written by the Nigerian writer Wole Soyinka. Sorry, I really hope my pronunciations are fine. Who won a Nobel Peace Prize? I don't know. Starting with you, Wilfred, if you've engaged with Wole Soyinka's work before.
Yes, Wole Soyinka is like the um, one of the greatest Nigerian writers. There's Chinua Achebe. They used to be, both of them used to be like the holy duo. Chinua Achebe is late now, but Wole Soyinka is still kicking and thriving. And his books generally I read some of them in secondary school. That's when they start introducing you to his work. A lot of his work can be difficult to access. They're not really accessible because he writes with this elevated, style, and that is his language is really, really elevated, and it can put a lot of people off. But he also has some that's like Death and the King's Horseman that is quite accessible and quite, easy to get into. And I remember when I was in secondary school, junior secondary, we read one of his works, The Lion and the Jewel. Yeah, that one wasn't funny. That we were in junior secondary school and they made us read it, but I don't think it was quite accessible because I remember the plot, the end of the whole thing going over my head. I didn't really understand what happened, and someone had to explain it. But yeah, that's just a primer on Wole Soyinka.
Tim, I don't know if you've interacted with Wole Soyinka before.
I am definitely very much aware of Wole Soyinka. I remember also, I think it was perhaps by the time we were doing literature in high school, I think his novels had been, they were taught in the curriculum of Uganda for a bit earlier on, but then I think, as Wilfred just mentioned, maybe they weren't as accessible as, say, someone like maybe Chinua Achebe. So yeah, like I wouldn't say I've read like all his work, like I'm aware of it, and I think later on in adulthood, because Wole Soyinka is like such a respected like writer and thinker. I see a bunch of like other interviews he's doing around the world, like on different issues, and yeah, he's very much like a sage now. He has earned that position, so that's kind of like I kind of know him now in his later career when he's more of a thought leader as opposed to maybe Wole Soyinka the writer. So yeah, I'd say that's my interaction with him.
Dope. I know of him. I didn't study literature at all, so I did not even. interacted with Chinua Achebe either, but knowing of both these writers' existence. Yeah, I think I'd heard about his work being inaccessible. I think a conversation I once had mostly was a criticism of him when people felt like he's not because his work is elevated that way. It's mostly targeted towards people outside of Africa. So I've known that about him, but yeah. Um, this was cool. I attempted to read the play, but I really have a lot of trouble reading plays. The stage direction that's included in most plays really throws me off. Um, but there's a Ugandan writer called Bear Anena who won the Wole Soyinka Prize for Literature, who I just want to plug is going to be a guest next year. Just excited about that. So the film is directed by B. Bandele, who unfortunately died just this year, and is a playwright and director of Half of a Yellow Sun, the book by Chimamanda. And it's also co-produced by Netflix and Ebony Life, which is run by Mo Abudu, who, yeah, I know her name. Like, that one is someone who I heard about way back, early, like maybe in 2016, the first time when I saw that Nigerian movies were starting to be shown at TIFF, at the Toronto International Film Festival. And they would tout her name, they would really put her up as, I think her Wikipedia is like Africa's most successful woman. I think she gets press a lot, so I kind of know I know her as this figure of success, and in this kind of uninformed way, I'm just really happy to see a woman succeeding. But yeah, so I consider her to be dope, but I don't know much about her. I don't know for you, Wilfred, what you think of Mo Abudu and Ebony Life and all that.
No, you're right. She does get a lot of press. She's also a press person herself, so she used to have a talk show where she was, trying to be like that Oprah kind of, you know, talk show host for a while. She had that going for a while, and then that's how she came into the media space. She used to work in the corporate world before that. And then from the media thing, she, followed that Oprah trajectory, started her TV station, private TV station, and ran it for a while. She doesn't run that anymore. What she does now is production studios. So she like makes movies and TV station and TV series, and sells them, or puts them on different platforms. And she's been able to produce some of the most successful Nigerian films at the box office. So films like The Wedding Party sequel. Yeah, what other film? Yeah, so her films have really been a hit at the box office, and then they're mostly comedies, easy to go down, kind of fluffy kind of films. And then at some point, she also decided to start doing more prestige fare. So, especially when the streamers came in, and there was a bit more money to throw around or to work with. Yeah, and so she's at that stage where she's trying to find her prestige language. I don't know that it's going great, but at least there's some attempt. There's trying. Somebody's trying. You can see that. Yeah, that's. I think that's like the brief background you might want to know.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never heard about her doing a TV show, like having that type of Oprah background. I really, really liked Wedding Party too. I think that's one of the first films I saw way back. Timothy, I don't know if you know of Mo Abudu and her work.
Yeah, I know of her, like, just on interviews. DSTV has, I think, that Ebony Life channel.
Ooh,
So yes, that's why I think I've seen like pieces on her. Where, as you said, she's pretty good at the press. So I think she's really good at marketing herself. So that's as far as I go with Moabdu. But yeah, I think she's probably. I think as far as producers go, yeah, the name I think I see around a lot, at least in the Nigerian film scene.
Okay, so now let's talk about the film. Let's start with our general thoughts. Any expectations we had going in, and if we liked the film or not. Yeah, so we'll start with you, Wilfred, since you're the guest. Tell us what you thought of the film. In general thoughts, yeah, general thoughts.
Thank you. You asked about my expectations. I guess
Yeah.
I guess I was when it was first announced. It's been announced for a couple of years. I guess we were all excited because it was Soyinka. It doesn't get more prestige, in brackets than Wole Soyinka. And Death and the King's Horseman has a rich history of stage adaptations. It's probably Soyinka's most popular play, because it's been studied to death, like every and it's been adapted also to death. So every almost in several countries across the world, not just in Nigeria, London, US, everywhere the play has gone round. So it's probably the one play that people who don't know Soyinka's work recognize him for, especially outside of Nigeria. So I guess people were excited, and then also, but then the excitement was also tempered with some resistance, because this is Ebony Life doing the adaptation, and they're known for the kind of stuff they are known for is like wedding party kind of stuff, fluffy comedies, romantic comedies, weddings, parties, great gowns, that kind of stuff. And yeah, so there was that, also that resistance, and like I wonder how they're going to do it. But then she found B. She got B. They got B to direct it. B is like a theater geek, a theater man. He has a background in theater. He studied Soyinka for a while. He's also a novelist and a filmmaker. I think probably he does all those things, all those other things, the plays, the novels, the writing. I think he does it better than the filmmaking. So also I wasn't, thrilled by his choice, but yeah, he came aboard, and yeah, and the film was good enough to premiere at TIFF, that's the Toronto Festival. So that also gave it a little more prestige. So it was all going great, And then it came on Netflix. Netflix acquired it a long time ago, and so yeah, as an adaptation, it's I don't think it's bad in the way that some of the Ebony Life films can be, problematic. I think it's like a serviceable adaptation, but then also it's not an original property, so it has like this history behind it. It has a great story behind it, and it's not like they were starting from scratch. So that's why I'm going to be a little bit harsher to judge, because I feel like they had a great story to work with, a great play, great pedigree, and yeah, while it was good, I think it could have been better. I was frustrated by it in many ways, mostly because I don't think the director brought plenty of visual design to it. He was so enamored by Soyinka's text and Soyinka's style, and he sort of just lifted that and put it on the screen. So it was like you were watching, for me at least, it was like you were watching another stage interpretation, as opposed to someone who had opened it up and worked it for the big screen or the small screen, whichever way you want to put it. So yeah, that was my main frustration with it. The main thing that the director brought to it, was that he translated the dialogue to Yoruba, which is the language of the people, of the setting. And Yeah, that was interesting, because you had the characters speaking Yoruba, and you had the white men and women who had been in Nigeria long enough to understand, the language. And so that was interesting. But aside from that, every other thing was just, I think, lifted from the play with little thoughts to how it's going to work for the screen. Yeah, I think that's how I feel about it. So I don't think it's like a miss is bad. I just don't think it's good either, or it's great.
I
But maybe you
see.
enjoyed it. I don't.
Oh,
What did you
no, no, no,
think?
no. For me, I liked it. I liked it quite a bit, quite a lot, but I found it to be way too theatrical. Like it felt like it was filmed. It didn't have so much. Yeah, that thing you've said where it felt like it was really directly lifted from there. Like it didn't feel big. I don't know why I felt like I was going to be watching something a bit more epic. But it's although yet the film is contained, it's all happening in one night. But it was just way too theater, like very speechy. And I don't like theater very much, so a lot of the theatrical things about it were kind of jarring for me. But I felt I really liked what it's about. I was a bit jarred when the white people showed up because I didn't know anything about the film. And this when the white people are really the only ones on screen. I was quite shocked by that. But yeah, otherwise I really did like it. Tim, I don't know what you thought.
I mean, you guys have pretty much said most of what I would say. I mean, of course, as far as expectations go, I did have some expectations because, again, as you mentioned, like a lot of the perhaps the big Nigerian films that I've been seeing around are usually, as you said, drama. I mean, romantic comedies and the like. So for that, like to actually see something that was going to be adapted from a Wole Soyinka novel was actually something that raised my expectations. Yeah, so I think my only real issue, as you said, was probably that it felt in many parts theatrical. It did have the flourishes, but then like again there were just issues with, as you said, it feeling like the scale of the film feeling a bit small, and yeah. So, but I think like see like just the opening scene, like the shot with him surrounded by the women, like again there's like a bit of a magical aspect to it. It was very interesting seeing those flourishes of creativity, but all in all I would say yes, it was in many ways, I think it felt very theatrical and very contained as opposed to it being like this epic expansive narrative. But again, maybe that's again because I wasn't familiar with the original text and the play itself, so maybe that could have been expected. But yeah, I that's probably the only issue I had with it also, the theatricality of it, especially the final third of the film when I think we'll get to that, but when they actually have him in the prison cell, yeah, that's when I actually really, really felt it. Like I felt even that setup alone could have been done in slightly more interesting ways. So yeah.
So thoughts on story, form, characters. Just mostly the storytelling elements on the film. Wilfred, would you start? Your thoughts there?
Yeah, so Eleshi Oba, or the King's Horseman, in English, we mentioned earlier that it's adapted from this Wole Soyinka play, which he in turn also adapted from like real events, and he sort of fictionalized it and made it more, and made it his, created a story out of real fictional story out of real events. So yeah, this particular adaptation, it had to to really criticize it because it's a very faithful adaptation. If you've read the play, it gets everything that is in the play and puts it on screen. So it's in that case, it's very faithful in that manner. But also, film sometimes fidelity is not the best, structure to go for when you're making films. Sometimes you just have to film, it's its own medium, and you just have to adapt your whatever you are copying or lifting from to the medium where to a style where it works for film. you know so on the one hand, it's a very faithful adaptation, and the story has a lot going for it. It's Shoiga was very vocal about, because the easiest thing people were going to read about into the play was that it was this clash of cultures between, the native indigenous culture of the Yoruba people or the Oyo people where it happened, and the British people who were colonizing us at the time. But he was insistent that it wasn't I mean, you could read that into it, but it wasn't for him. That wasn't his primary intention. His primary intention was trying to explain how the living, the dead, and the afterworld, the unborn, how the living, the dead, and the unborn are all, united or linked through this what's the word now, like the circle of life, so to speak, if you will, if I borrow from the Lion King, like how we are all linked together, and how any disruption in one sort of scatters the balance and leads to chaos. So this man, the king had died, and this man was supposed to die with the king, but it wasn't necessarily a tragedy. They weren't looking at it as a tragedy, because in his lifetime he was spoiled, he was taken care of, and he understood that he has one job, at the end of the day. So when the king died, he's supposed to follow the king to the afterlife, and in that way, ensure that the balance of, the universe is kept going. And so that was Shoyinka's primary, that's what he wanted people to get out of it. And all the whole colonial dialogue could be secondary to that. So in that sense, the film does all the follows all the beats that are in this. The play is a very slim play, by the way. I don't know how many pages, but it's not lengthy, So, and the film is also not long, so you see that everything was captured. But I feel like the writing was so enamored to it was treating Shoyinka's work as a Bible, and was like, oh, we dare not touch it, we dare not, change it, we dare not do this, we dare not do that. But Shoyinka is not a filmmaker. He wrote his play for the stage. You are a filmmaker, you are making your film for the screen. And so there's two different mediums. There's Shoyinka, the play, there's the play, the King's Horseman, the play, and there's your film, the King's Horseman, the film. And they're two different things, even though they might be working from the same source. So I feel like, yes, all of those, all of the dramatic beats, all of the, was captured, but it didn't have the power that it would have on stage, only because it looked like it was from a distance. So I wonder, for instance, what would happen if they opened the village up a bit. We got to see more of, say, the female character, the Yaloja. We got to understand her a bit more, and to see how women who are in powerful positions also perpetrate, some kind of perpetrate the culture of patriarchy that they met on ground. I'm just giving an example. For instance, also, I feel like the actors were great. I don't really have a fault with the actors, but it all felt like also they were on stage and they were these great monologues and they had to keep, there wasn't, I didn't see a lot of internalization work done. It just felt like, oh, we need to come and perform, and they were really performing. In that case, you can't fault them. But it's just, again, for the screen, it's different. You have to be seen internalizing, and then vocalizing, and then registering what you get from your scene partner. So yeah, all this to say that it would have been okay to take a different angle sometimes. Also with that culture of someone dying after the king, it happened maybe in the 40s, I think. It's not a very progressive culture, regardless of whatever it is trying to do. Maybe I wish he had engaged with that also, since that's the primary thing that Soyinka wanted anyway. Is that the only way to ensure that balance is restored and kept, and what are the consequences really? So when the Eleshi didn't do his job and his son had to do it, is that the only consequence of that? That's what happens to the people after. Anyway, so it just felt like there were so many ideas and ends that the filmmakers could have latched on to tell a more satisfying story, but the story of the film, of the text of the play, it's great, and I like it. There's a lot to chew on. There's a lot going on. I just wish that maybe they had done things a bit more different.
Well
Sorry if I
said.
went on and on and on.
No, it's fine. Really, really well said.
Yeah, very insightful. That's what I'll say. Yeah, no, I mean, I could basically listen to just Wilfred do
Right?
the whole thing. Like, yeah, he's hitting all the, yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty. But yeah, I think besides what he said, I would say just as far as like story goes or like form, I really like at least how you can tell the juxtaposition between the first half of the film and the second half, where you're seeing the King's Horseman getting all this praise from everyone, and he's basically being treated like the king himself. And like even just watching that beginning, I kind of knew that yeah, the end is going to be really, really dark. So like yeah, I like the kind of like the tone of the film in the first half when everything is going well for him, and then in the second half when things have started to change and like people are beginning to turn on him, you can really actually feel that. I think maybe as far as tone, and maybe that's again something which in theater, I don't know, maybe theater it is possible with like set design and all that, but like in film, I think those are kind of like some of the elements that the medium of film can bring to like a story. And I feel maybe that's something I think B may have done, at least in my view, quite well, because I could actually feel the difference in tone, and it kind of affects the mood of the story. It actually leaves you feeling something. You kind of feel in the beginning he's getting all this praise, he's this great man, he's going to do this noble thing. Then in the end, when he actually kind of goes against that and isn't going out of his way to fulfill it, you also do feel like kind of like the gravity of his actions. Another thing maybe about the characters as well. Yeah, I think the acting was good. Wilfred mentioned something about the female characters, like the Iyaloja. Like, yeah, I felt those were, like, as you said, characters who could have been expanded on a bit. And, like, maybe, as you said, that could have been an avenue to get into, like, more of the story. And, like, maybe as you're retelling this respected play, you kind of actually like update it in a way to like maybe, as you said, include like issues of the patriarchy and things of that sort. So I'd say yeah, that. And again, maybe another thing I'll point out about the characters was there's the character of, I think it was called Amusa, who's kind of playing like the Uncle Tom type character, who's basically like going against his own people. And yeah, I was kind of annoyed by the way his demeanor was, like he was speaking like, I know they usually use that as like a way of like kind of showing the person who's like trying to be maybe like more European or Western, yet while forgetting their identity. So like it's even in other movies, like say a movie like not to bring up American films here, but like the Django Unchained, the Samuel L. Jackson character, like they usually like, yes, that's how they are portrayed. But like, I mean, in a movie where like the white people could understand the language people were speaking, the Yoruba and all that, and it felt kind of okay for me. Yeah, I felt he was kind of made to look too much of a clown again, which is okay. Perhaps that's how they're trying to caricaturize him as. But yeah, I felt for me it was just something as like, yeah, this, maybe it wasn't that necessary as far as the characters go.
Really, a lot of the same for me as well. I think for me though, the lead performance, I really really dug it. I liked the person who was playing the Elesin Oba, and like you guys have mentioned, they really could have taken time to do more with the women. Specifically for me, I really would have wanted a bit more on the woman that he decides to marry. Uh, and like I just wish she was more of a person. Like she's mostly just it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a
yeah.
virgin. She's just a
She's
virgin.
I'm like what? She's really, really not a person. It's so strange. So I wish there was more of they had taken some time to do something with her. Yeah, I liked the lady who was in power as well. She was cool. I really, yeah, more of them really would have been great. Um Olunde, there's the character called Olunde, the one who comes from America. I was I really liked that turn of the film. But I also do really wish, yeah, like what you had said, that they would, like when you really think of it, it's not the greatest tradition, like it's not something that, but then there is also the thing of like, oh, they really did succeed to make all things stop. Like people now fully mostly don't do any tradition. So I actually found the movie to be like quite optimistic to see that they actually rejected the colonial power that was there. Yeah, mostly that. Let's now talk about the filmmaking. Wilfred, you start the production and yeah, the filmmaking aspects of the
Yeah, so so
movie.
so production wise, I mean, there was plenty of effort, trying to create this 40s or your kingdom in the on screen. It wasn't as, like you mentioned, it wasn't as visually interesting, say, as Anikulapo, in terms of having multiple sets and things, action moving from one place to the other. This was more static. There was the marketplace, there was the colonial house where the white people were living, and I think in between everything happened, in between those spaces en route, and you know, so there was some attempt made to like create this world. It was a very small world, but you could see them. There was food, there were people cooking, there was the marketplace, people selling, there was the commerce. They were trying to show commerce, of the time, and the handwork, how the people made clothes and made, is it ashofi or ashoke, from so in terms of the production design, I would give it a pass. It's not great, but it's fine. Mostly. Um, Again, a lot of my issues would be with, just B's approach to the material and how static everything seemed to be. So I was talking to someone and they were asking, yeah, so what is the life of this village outside the marketplace? Like, are they doing things? Are the people interesting? What are their lives like outside of, the election and the powerful people? And I was like, well, that's an interesting point. So So I guess it also speaks to, what we mentioned about opening it up, a bit more, yeah. So production wise, I would give it a pass. I don't. It's it. There is just enough to make it work. You'd really wish that they had gone the extra mile. And while it works, it's fine, it works. But you really wish they had gone the extra mile to make it, grander or make it greater. And if you are working in partnership with Netflix, I would assume that there's a bit more money, than the regular Nigerian film, and there's a bit more resources that you could have tapped into, when you were making the film. And it's just a lot of that didn't show up on screen. The sound could have been better, but it was fine. You don't. It's fine. It works for what it does. Yeah, it's a production that I would give pass mark, actually, even though it's not as exciting as I would have wished, but it works.
Yeah. Um, be- Before you say Timothy, I wonder about the costuming. Is it that because I feel like the clothes that they're wearing are like clothes of today? Like, is it just that
No, no,
I'm
no.
so
Those clothes
confused?
made a comeback, so it feels like, yeah.
Okay.
So it feels like they've been around for a while, and people have really held on to them. It's just the styles have
Uh,
changed, and how you make them have changed. But also a lot of old school, are making a comeback.
okay. That was so confusing to me, even with Anikulapo. I'm like, it doesn't. Yeah, thanks for telling me that because I was so confused. Timothy, you can go next.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I was just my only point literally was actually about the costumes because I think maybe that was the thing I enjoyed the most because I really did enjoy like the array of colors. Like like at least outside of Nigeria, the perception is that Nigerians are quite very flamboyant, boisterous people and very expressive. So like I could definitely feel that at least through the clothing, be it of like say the Ialoja, and she's kind of like a woman of status, and yeah, she's dressed differently than the King's Horseman and everyone else pretty much in the story. I feel the costumes were pretty good, even like the colonial officers kind of getting those details of the shorts and the socks, that that's a look that perhaps many of us like remember from perhaps like primary schools and stuff here, especially which schools which went through which were countries which were colonized by Britain. It's pretty much still a thing people wear, but yeah, just I felt the costumes were actually quite good. They made the images a lot more like interesting to look at and with a different array of colors. So yeah, I would say at least as far as like production goes, I do feel yeah they could maybe have been like maybe the sets weren't as expansive and all that, but like I feel for all the characters in it, even just like the costumes, the white people were like dancing around the house in like the costumes that they wear for I think it was like some rites or rituals. Yeah, I think they were yeah, the masquerade, yeah, like those things were just so like nice to look at. Like I didn't know they actually looked that beautiful. So yeah, that's kind of I would say where I actually saw a lot of like maybe some effort went into like production, but as you said, pretty much like I think everything from like cinematography to sound, the acting, all that, I think it was done competently, which I think having seen like the transition Nigerian films have gone through, I think that's maybe something that in this more recent times like there's a heavy value on like production value and film looking like a film like a polished film, and I feel they actually did achieve that. So yeah, as you said, it gets a pass also from me for yeah production.
Yeah. Tim, you had mentioned the opening scene. I really, really dug that. Really, really love that. And there's some drumming that would happen when, like, he was interacting with the other world or something. There was just some drumming that I really liked as well. I found it really effective. I think when it comes to what like more, I was kind of disappointed in the wedding scene. Like weddings are such a big like tend to be something I remember a lot from African films, like going back to old films just from around. I'm like fine the wedding was impromptu, but I just wished for way more. Like our weddings are a bigger deal than that. Yeah, the spectacle. Just there was room for. I really really wished the wedding scene just had more. Yeah,
And interestingly,
that's
that's what Ebony Life does. Well, more Abudu's films.
mm.
Everybody knows you come to them for the wedding. You know, there's always going to be like a wedding scene where, you know, so maybe they were trying to deflect, you know, that
Yeah,
this is not that kind of film. I don't know. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Probably.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't know. If you guys have anything else you would like to say, any additional thoughts about the film that you may have not yet talked about.
Yeah, so I guess maybe just to say in conclusion that it's an adaptation that is fine. It doesn't have that extra, you know, or quality, you know. Especially, I feel like if you're going for a prestigious, you know, work of literature like that, you should have more things to add, you know. But also, again, it's a frustration that we've had with B. Bandele, the director, because when he made Half of a Yellow Sun, Chimamanda's epic novel, there was also a lot of frustration around that, you know. So I don't know that, you know, he's maybe the person to direct or to bring to life, you know, this adaptations, you know, because also that was my fear going in, you know. Oh, it's B again. I still haven't really recovered from Half of a Yellow Sun, and now you're doing this one. So which is not saying that they both they both work, you know, in terms of respectable adaptations. They're not disasters, you know, but they don't sing. They don't like. There's no, and that's why I guess if you were following the drama, I don't know if you heard of the drama in when it was time to make the selection to submit at the Oscars.
Yeah.
Yes,
They
those were my additional thoughts.
Yeah, it was easy for them not to pick
Mm.
even this one, despite all the prestige that it came, because it looked like it was the easy, you know, it was the easy pick, you know. Some be Bandele directing, Wole Soyinka, you know, produced by Ebony Life and Netflix, Play Toronto. You know, it had all those, you know, prestigious things going for it, and you would think that okay, that would be the easy pick, but it also wasn't, because, you know, it needed something else to cross over to me from good to great, and I guess that's fine. They've done the best that they can, but yeah, there's a lot more room for improvements, both for, well, it's sad that we lost B and may his soul rest in peace. But this time for Ebony Life to go back, because they also have other stuff they are supposed to be adapting. They have the rights for, I don't know if you know of this Nigerian novel, The Secret Lives of Baba Shegi's Wives. It's a great book also, and they have the rights for that.
Yes.
So you would hope that they would take the lessons from this, you know, and go back to the drawing board. But yeah, good decent attempt. Just not quite there yet.
My final thoughts maybe they'll be a bit tied to the passing of B Bandele before the film came out, because I feel this is a movie that in many ways is discussing in a way death, if be it death of people, death of systems in society, things, culture, stuff of the sort. And just because I actually did see earlier in the year when he did pass, then I saw at the end of the film when they kind of remind us that he actually did die, and they put P. Bandele from this year to this year. Then we have that final scene where there's a procession, and they're having, as the credits roll, which I felt for me was also just one of the most actually moving scenes in the whole in the whole film. So again, how sometimes the life itself feeds into the art, and how sometimes the art and the artist are sometimes created are things that I find very interesting. So I know, it was quite sad actually, very moving, but as the film goes, as we said, it's a perfectly competently done adaptation of a great African play, and I think it definitely should be seen in spite of its flaws. It's one movie that should be seen widely. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I agree. I really think, I don't know, the Oscar people, what they're, I think I don't know, putting this forth would not be a bad option. The options that come through are not always the greatest films, but I would say the same. First off, for anyone to watch, it's really goes down very easy and moves pretty quick, and it's just 1 hour 30 minutes. Such a good watch, I think. I really recommend it for people to see. Those are my final thoughts. Really, not much else. Yeah, you guys are done. No
Yeah.
brewing thoughts
Oh,
still.
I
We're
know.
good.
I think that's it, at least for the King's Horseman. I would definitely want to have Wilfred back on, maybe for another episode, maybe something on Nollywood, something a bit more expansive. We could also get into that, because I'm fascinated by that film industry. So hopefully we'll have time for that in the future.
Sure. Just
Yeah.
let me know when. And
Yeah.
thank you for
Cool.
having me.
Thank you for coming through.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Wilfred. This has been an honor. Hope we'll have you back sometime. Thanks for your really insightful statements. Yeah, that's it. You've been listening to Cinema Red Pill. I'm Sharon,
And I'm Timothy.
and you've been with Wilfred. That's it.
People make films about themselves, what they want, what they love, what they fear most. Here we're nothing but props in their stories.
Somebody say